Welcome to American Pulse. Tonight we have a very unique and very interesting guest, and it's a very interesting episode. We're going to talk through the series of meeting with successful Egyptian Americans, American Egyptians who succeeded in the country here in the United States. I'm happy and honored to have Mr. George Sorio, the man next to President Trump in many pictures, and the man who had worked for the Trump organization for many years. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming. And George has been the former executive vice president of the Trump organization, and we've all known George from the pictures that have been on the websites and the news media outlets. We've seen that this Egyptian man that's standing and sitting next to the president all the time, and we haven't had the chance to speak to him, so finally have the chance to speak to you tonight.
My pleasure, Michael. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm honored that you would have me as a guest.
Thank you very much. The honor is all mine. So, George, let's start with your family and upbringing. Where were you born? And if you can talk to us about your parents and...
Sure. I always considered myself to have a unique and strange background. I'm probably the only person, certainly that I know, that has 3 passports. So, how did this come to be? My father is Egyptian. He left Egypt, like many others, in the early 60s. He had finished his medical training at Cairo University and left to continue training and do a fellowship with the Royal College of Surgeons in England. So he left Egypt, barely spoke English, ended up in England, where he met my mother. And, this is the part of where my background is strange and unique. My mother is Scottish, from the Isle of Lewis, a very small island on the northwest coast of Scotland. She was born in a town called Stornoway and grew up in another town called South Bragger. But she was a surgical nurse. She met my father. My father was ear, nose, and throat, head and neck surgeon. They were married. I was born in England, in Norwich, England, to be exact, in 1968. And we ended up, like many others, emigrating to the United States late 1969. We landed in New York, and I ended up growing up in northern New Jersey.
Oh, wow. So Egyptian, Scottish, English, American.
That's right.
That's amazing. So how did it come about finding a job at the Trump organization? How did you first start working for Trump?
Well, it was never something that I set out to do, Michael. When I was a child growing up in New Jersey, Trump was kind of a larger than life character. We all know him from the casinos, and he had a huge presence. For anybody that grew up in the New York metro area will understand what I'm saying. But I used to, when I turned 21, I can remember going to the Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City. I many years later told him, look, every time I'm a guy that has pretty good luck, but every time I went to one of his casinos, I would lose money. I actually told him that story.
Oh, wow.
When I first started working for him. But it was about 2002. I was working at a law firm called Dakotas Fitzpatrick, and I was representing a group of Wall Street investors that had purchased a piece of land. They grabbed it out of bankruptcy. It was John DeLorean. Remember John DeLorean, the DeLorean
Yes.
car? It was his prior estate in Bedminster. That's currently where Trump National Bedminster is. That's the club where he spends a lot of time with his family during the summer. But at the groundbreaking ceremony, he was literally standing at the buffet table, and I think he was getting some shrimp. And I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Trump, I'm George Sorio with Dakotas Fitzpatrick. I worked on the deal. Oh, very nice to meet you. I asked him, look, is it true? I've always heard that your mother was born in Stornoway. Yes, what do you know about Stornoway? I said, well, my mother was born in Stornoway.
Wow.
And I spent almost every summer of my life, we'd spend 4 or 5 weeks in Scotland every summer. So we ended up having a conversation, and at the time I was looking to buy an apartment in New York, and he said to me, look, I just opened Trump World Tower. It's a building right across the street from the United Nations, and I want you in that building.
Oh, that's great.
Give this person a call, come see me next week. And, a lot of people, Michael, in the business world, they make small talk and they say things like that and they don't really mean it. But being who I am, I called them up. I said, look, I want to talk to you about buying this apartment. Lo and behold, a week later, I bought an apartment from him in Trump World Tower.
And being who he is, he picked up the call and he followed through what he promised.
Followed what he promised. And, who was I at the time? I was, young, 30-something-year-old, lawyer, like many others in New York. But he gave me that courtesy and that respect. And one thing led to another, and I became involved in the politics of the building. I became president of the board. And it was an interesting building. It was a 90-story high-rise with a lot of... It's the same one
in 48th and First, right?
First. Literally, we're right across the street from the UN. So there was a lot of interesting people in the building. I became a member of the board. He started to give me a little bit of legal work, and then kind of one thing led to another. And, we found ourselves, in his office talking about the possibility of, hey, why don't you come work for me? I have this land in Scotland, and our families are from Scotland. And
oh, wow.
So that
worked out.
That was about 2006 that he put me through a little period of testing where he asked me to look at some things and, wanted my opinion on a few things. But finally, he said, hey, look, I'd like you to come work for me. You're hired. And, at the time, I was a lawyer, but I was really looking to do something different. Now, talking about the other side of my family, my father's side, Egypt, my Uncle George, my father's brother, the person that I was named after, did a lot of development. He was an architect, he was a builder, did a lot of projects in Egypt. So as a kid, I would spend my summers in Scotland, but we would always come around Christmas time, mid-December till mid-January. They took us out of school, and we would spend 4 or 5 weeks in Cairo, primarily at my grandparents'. My grandparents had an apartment in Mohandesin, and we would spend that time there. And I would often go with my Uncle George, not only being the person I was named after, but I was very close to him. I still am very close to him. He had a tremendous influence on me, but I spent time on construction sites and seeing his projects, and it had a profound impact on me. And I always wanted to go into development. So when I came into the Trump organization,
you already had an idea.
Yeah, well, we talked about it, and I told him, look, I was a partner in my old law firm, and why would I leave that position to take another legal position? So he said, look, come to the company, and I'm going to find the right thing. I know what you want to do. And the first project he assigned me to was the Trump International Golf Links project in Aberdeen. So it was nice for many reasons. It was nice to go back and do some work in the country where my mother was from. But at the same time, it was a substantial project. We had 1,400 acres of land. We were building hotel, golf course, residence, and he entrusted me with that whole project. So I kind of morphed into a real estate development person.
So I guess you were not only doing strictly law at the Trump organization, you were doing real estate law and construction law, or?
Primarily, I went into development. The first project that I really worked on was the project in Aberdeen, the northeast coast of Scotland. About 3 miles of coastline, 1,400 acres. We went in with an application to build 2 golf courses, hotel, hundreds of homes. It was a large, substantial Trump project, and I really took control of all aspects of that job, from completing acquisitions, We acquired that property in 6 different closings. So I saw those through. And I also took the project through the planning and zoning phase. And then ultimately when we gained approval, and it was a very long, protracted, funny thing, when he gave me that assignment, he said, oh, this is going to be a very easy project. Just go over there, we'll build a golf course and a hotel, some homes, and you're going to love it. But it turned out to be a very complicated, protracted, difficult project.
I'm sure.
We had a number of battles with the Scottish government. We went through a very lengthy appeals process, but ultimately we prevailed. And I took the project. I hired the development team. I actually oversaw construction. I had a very interesting job. As I tell people all the time, there were days where I started out my day in a hearing room, and at the end of the day ended up on the back of the bulldozer, overseeing the construction of a whole.
Amazing.
And I didn't really know much about it, but that's just how the Trump organization worked. I learned by experience. And that was really an example that was started top down. Trump was really involved in every aspect of the business, whether he was negotiating a complicated deal with a bank or, overseeing the redevelopment of a hotel. He had an intimate knowledge and an understanding of all levels of the business, from the boardroom to the construction site. And that's what he expected of his executives. So somebody like me, I wore many different hats. I had the ability to go in and go into a courtroom or do a hearing, but at the same time, I had the ability to understand what went into building something, what went into constructing a golf course. And I learned through experience by being there. And that was another, lesson that he emphasized to me ad nauseum. You have to be there. You have to be on top of things. You have to talk to the experts. Don't ever let your eye off the ball. Watch what's going on. Know what's going on. Understand all aspects of the project.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get a good product. And the second half of that,
so he's more of a hands-on person.
And you also, Michael, you have to love what you're doing. I mean, that was another common theme of the organization, is that you have to love what you're doing. You have to have some passion for what you're working on. Otherwise, again, you're not going to get the best out of people unless they understand, they know what they're doing, and they also have to love it. And loving it is equally as important to having the necessary level of expertise. I mean, people that aren't in love with what they're doing are never going to be great at anything.
From the pictures that I've seen of you and President Trump and his family, it seems like that you didn't only work for the organization, you were much closer to the family on a family basis.
They were all very good to me, Michael. I think what I can say, people will always ask me, hey, how did you work with him? We see what's going on, on television, or he seems very difficult. And I would say, no, that's really not true. I really got along very well with him. He treated me very well. And a line that I use, which really expresses that, is that aside from my own 2 parents, there are very few people in life that gave me opportunity, stood beside me, mentored me, and treated me well. Other than my own parents, it's Trump. And by extension, his family. They're good people. They treated me well. And I don't think that what I am saying is something that is unique and particular to only me. I think if you talk to people in the company, a lot of them are going to tell you the same thing. And, I was there for almost, I met him in 2002, so it's been 17 years. I worked for the company for almost 13 years. I have options. I could have done other things.
Yes.
But I enjoyed it. I loved it. They treated me well. They gave me great latitude to use my own discretion to get things done, the way I saw fit. Obviously, I was doing what they wanted me to do. But another thing that I loved about the organization is that, and Mr. Trump, or President Trump himself, is he doesn't micromanage you. He'll give you an end goal. This is what I
That's what he wants, and he lets you do it.
And you're expected to produce, and it's a small place. It's a tight group of people. There was no room to hide. There are two results: success or failure. There's no in between. You either succeeded or you failed. So, I really enjoyed that type of life. I was grateful for the opportunity that he gave me, but I was also grateful for the support, the mentoring, the advice. I felt that I had a strong force behind me, and gave me the confidence to go out and do what I needed to do because I knew that he had my back. Now, understand that concept, Michael, having your back.
It's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge.
And it's something that, people
Do you still
ask me,
feel he has your back?
I think he has my back, and I think he has all of our backs. Look, let's face it, in the context of, what do I know? My business is law. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for 25 years. Now, there's a lot of lawyers out there, and I think when you practice a certain amount of time, there's a lot of people that are skilled in their craft and they're good at what they do.
Yes.
But what impresses me is I want the person that has my back. And if I'm going to hire a lawyer, I want that lawyer that has my back. It's a pivotal concept. And I think, applying it to the context of politics, isn't that exactly what you want in your president?
Absolutely.
Don't you want a guy that has your back? So,
Absolutely.
To me, I feel that he has our back.
I am obligated here to ask you about what's going on nowadays. I really want to get into more of the book and other things, but the impeachment news are bothersome, and I feel the president doesn't deserve what the Democrats have been how they have been treating him. But I wanted to know the impact from your perspective on Trump and his re-election process with this bad news of the impeachment, which I
think before I comment on that, this is just water off his back. This is not a process that's going to intimidate him or cause him to experience any anxiety. I mean, first and foremost, Trump is a fighter. Yeah. He's a tough guy. He doesn't quit. And he's one of these people that the harder you push him, the harder he's going to push back. So I don't think anybody should have any concern that Trump is bothered by any of this. He's going to rise. He's going to deal with the challenge. I just can't believe how strong. Like anything else.
I can't believe how strong is the man that they've been fighting him for 2.5, 3 years.
It's a guy that doesn't quit,
and he doesn't quit.
Michael, it's a guy that never. One of the things. I mean, I learned a lot from him, but one of the things that was really drilled into my head is never quit, never give up, never stop fighting. You see the measure of a person when you watch how they perform
under pressure,
with a failure or under pressure. When it's easy, it's easy. It's easy to be great when there's smooth seas.
Whenever smooth sailing.
But I mean, again, that was one of the, like anyone else, I had some slip-ups and some falls in my career where I lost a hearing or didn't get something done. And Trump's attitude was always like, pick yourself up, dust it off, go forward, put on your armor and get it done. And again, that was a very valuable, and it's something that I try to impart on my own children. Okay, a person is measured how they perform under pressure, how they handle failure. I mean, this is a critical thing. Unfortunately, I think in the modern world, people try to protect their kids. We have to give them that piece of knowledge that life is complicated, life is tough, it isn't always easy. You have to overcome stumblings. So back to your question about the impeachment, I think it's a very unfortunate and sad time in the history of America. The concept of impeachment is one that should be used sparingly. And so far, I have seen nothing but more nonsense, more unsubstantiated claims to date. We have...
Even the phone call, the White House had released the phone call to the Ukrainians.
It's all hearsay. I mean, I think it's unfair, first of all, that a president, someone is listening to a phone call that he's having with another world leader. I mean, look, let's be honest. The world is a tough place. And sometimes our leaders, we would hope, need to do tough things. And you have to give them some flexibility and some latitude. But, you know, again, without going into, you know, all the nitty-gritty, I think the bottom line is, you know, even looking at it as a practical matter, we have an election coming up next year. If the Democrats had, you know, half a brain, you want him out of office, put the right candidates up there and win the White House. I mean, they still can't accept the fact.
In the ballot box, not.
They can't accept the fact that they lost 2016. They're still hung up on that. And I don't think this strategy, I understand why they're using this strategy of impeachment, because let's face it, if you've seen the spectrum of candidates that they've put forward, none of them could beat Trump. I mean, this is really all they
trying to make him look bad and trying to take away credits from him, and
because that's all they can do. I mean, that's their
instead
only
of succeeding on their own, they just, you know, and instead of trying to make myself look good, I'd rather make you look bad. So this way,
that's right. They're losing.
Yeah,
and this is to me, a losing strategy, because I think the American public is not as divided as some members of the media make it out to be. Okay, at the end of the day, we're all the same. I don't care what your background is or what you do to make a living. At the end of the day, what do we all want? We want the best for our families. We want the best for our kids. We want to live in a country that's safe, where our borders are protected, where we can work and make an honest living and succeed and hopefully pass a better situation on to the next generation. I don't think what I'm saying, you get anybody, I mean, that's really people's basic goal in life. We all have the same goals. So I think this strategy of creating division, making up scandals, you know, this whole thing about impeachment, you know, the founding fathers, I don't think ever intended that term to be thrown around. I mean, these are people that weren't satisfied with an election. And, you know, if you'll remember, on election day, he hadn't even been sworn in. He hadn't even taken office. They were already talking about impeachment from day one.
They just didn't like the man.
They didn't like the man. And, you know, even this whole situation with the Ukraine, Nancy Pelosi stood up on national television and brought up this concept of launching an investigation before she had even seen the transcript. Now, bear in mind, as a matter of law, this transcript is also based on hearsay. The person who authored it didn't actually hear what was going on. It was reported to him from third parties.
And I think there was a problem also in submitting the right paperwork at the right place.
There seemed to be, you know, and again,
they did not send it to the proper through the proper channels.
I'm not an expert in these things. I mean,
That's what we read in the news.
I'm not part of the administration. Exactly. I'm not a government lawyer. But what really strikes me is basic stuff, the rules of evidence. Okay? Hearsay is not admissible. Every person, if someone is going to offer testimony against you, well, that person has the right to take that individual and subject them to cross-examination. Okay, to test the veracity of what their statement is.
And the credibility of the person.
That's right. That's one of the backbones of American jurisprudence. The right to cross-examine witnesses. So we don't have any of this here. The whole thing is farcical. It's purely political. So the sad thing is the government now is frozen at a time, a very dangerous time in the world, internationally and domestically. And what do we have? A year before an election, we have an entire party that's focused on nothing but investigations and making up scandals. For the last 3 years. It was Russia. It was this one thing after the other, and it's all failed.
I think part of it, I think the impeachment came across at this time because the Mueller report was, you know, did not blame the president for anything. So it came actually on his favor rather than anything that they were looking for. And they were fishing for the part that he was trying to hinder or stop the investigation. And this is
Michael, it was collusion, and then it was obstruction of justice.
Yes, that's what I was looking for.
And now it's the Ukraine. It's another failed. But
it's like one thing after the other.
The good news, though, is I think the American public is a lot smarter than the Democratic Party is giving them credit.
Yeah.
People are going to see through this. It's going to hurt them.
Yes.
I think ultimately, collateral damage will be Joe Biden.
Yes.
Okay, I think he's finished, and he
especially after
probably was, one person that could actually run against the president.
Let's face it, he was the strongest candidate so far.
His poll numbers seem to be that way.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't think, who seems to be, and again, I'm not an expert in politics. I'm just an armchair, person giving my opinions from what I'm seeing. But again, I don't believe that the United States is ready to go in that direction of socialism.
Yes.
Okay. I think we remember, when I talk to people that support concepts like socialism, tell me where it's worked. I'll show you a lot of places where it's failed. I'll show you a lot of places where it ruined people's lives.
Yes.
But show me one place that it works. And there are none. There is no answer to that question. So, I'm amazed that politicians like that, I'm actually, someone said this to me earlier tonight. This is a person that has a tremendous military background. Said, I'm ashamed that people like them are even in the positions where they are now. It's a disgrace.
It is.
Okay. All the people who sacrificed their lives, to create a country. Is the United States perfect? No, there is no perfect nation. There is no perfect system of government. But when I emigrated to this country, something that my mother and my father would say to me all the time is that the United States is the envy of the world. Okay, and I was kind of brought up with that mentality that I live in a great country. I live in a free country. I live in a country that trusts its citizens. Okay, we know that 80% of the people on earth don't have that freedom. I can go in the United States on television and say anything I want about the president,
about anybody,
whomever, and I have no repercussions. Mm-hmm. Most of the world doesn't enjoy those freedoms. And they go on and on and on. So is the system perfect? Of course it's not. There is no perfect system. But I still think we're the envy of the world. And it sickens me that we have presidents like Obama, who went around and apologized for what the United States is. No U.S. citizen should do anything like that, never mind the U.S. president.
Disgraceful.
And we're seeing it again. With some of these candidates. This is a national tragedy. But I think people see through it.
The problem also, what strikes me the most is that if people are very particular on phone calls that the president had made, what happened to the 33,000 emails that Hillary Clinton bleached out from, the server?
There's so much hypocrisy. If Trump had ever done anything like that.
Oh my God, they would have nailed them. They would have.
So there's a lot of hypocrisy, but I think it's driven out of desperation.
Yeah.
And they know we're winning. That's what it's
coming from. So you have no doubt that President Trump will
I don't have any doubt. I think when you move outside the urban areas and you go out into the real United States, people support him. People understand what he's doing.
And this is what he did in the first election, and I think what he's going to do in the second.
Well, that's right. An interesting lesson, another lesson I had from him, I was walking with him one day on a construction site, and he just said to me, George, people always ask me, how did I do well? How did I succeed in life? He says, the answer is really simple. He said, I look around, I see what people want, and I give it to them. That easy. Now, isn't that exactly what he did in 2016? And it's a story that I always tell. A night 2 nights before the election. I was watching CNN or MSNBC. They're all the same, and no path to victory. Trump was behind in the polls by 10, 11%. I mean, they were already, it's finished. No path to victory. But he tapped into something that all the experts, the pundits, the advisors, they didn't get. He knew what people wanted.
And he
gave it to them. Now, look, is he rough around the edges, perhaps? Does he say or do things that people say are unpresidential?
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect, but that's who he is. He is real.
This is the
He is
this is why
genuine.
you called your book The Real Deal.
The Real Deal.
This is the book written by George Sorio and Damian Bates. And actually, I read the tweet that the president wrote on this book, and it was quite interesting because
Thank you.
it was amazing that the president himself would tweet and to promote your book. And what I love the most on his tweet is he said that George, this book was written by two people that really know who I am, unlike
They said we were very smart.
Very smart, yes, very smart.
Use the term loosely.
Yes, and really knew who I am versus other things were written by people that don't even know who is Donald Trump.
Well, I'm sitting in the Oval Office with him, and we were having a conversation, and he said these guys come in here, they interview me for half an hour, and they go out and they write a book.
You were sitting in the Oval House with him? I just want to emphasize.
I was sitting, we were, it was maybe one of the first times I went to see him after the election.
Yes.
I was in Washington for a bunch of different reasons, and I just went in to say hello. And we started to have this conversation, and I said, hey, look, why don't you let me write a book?
That's amazing.
And, he was quiet, and he looked at me and said, yeah, go ahead, write a book. And for the record, I wrote the book along with Damian. Damian is a colleague. He's a well-known journalist. He was actually editor-in-chief of a conglomerate of newspapers in Scotland. He covered a lot of our projects, but he became a good friend of mine. And, he was really an integral part of, I've never done anything like this. So he really helped me, take the concepts and
you
put them
have
into
the
words.
experience and the contest and.
But he was also a person that knew
President Trump.
the president well, so the two of us worked. And, I've said it many times in other interviews, but I wrote that book. The copy that you have is the copy that I gave him. Okay, there was no editing. Okay, the only thing I did, any person that I interviewed, like any person who's a journalist, you verify facts.
Yes.
This is what I've written. Is this true?
Yes.
So he gave me the latitude and the flexibility to write a book, and it's really an honest.
And it's based on the trust you made.
Well, it's an honest reflection of my experience with the organization, and it didn't stop with just me. I drew opinions and stories from a lot of other people from all different levels in the company, and I think it's really an honest reflection of what the man is like. What it's like to work for him in the company from the perspective of many others. Through my eyes.
It's quite an interesting experience.
Thank you.
Have you had any feedback from?
Feedback has been very positive.
Yeah.
The book is done well. I think what I like hearing the most, because it was really one of my original goals, was I wanted to change the perception. I mean, there were many reasons why I did the book. It's something that I wanted to do for a while, but I also was tired of hearing the narrative about what he was like, and it was really different.
It was all wrong, probably.
It was wrong. Look, it's not unusual for a public figure to have, a persona publicly and then
a real persona.
But I think the difference with the president, it was so sharp, and there were so many falsehoods. So part of what drove me is I did feel a sense of obligation to set the record straight. Again,
off the camera and off topic, we spoke about Egypt, and I must tell my viewers that you have so much passion for Egypt, and it's amazing that I always, when I meet successful Egyptian Americans, people who migrated to America a long time ago, and they still have this strong ties to Egypt. And I always question myself, is it Egypt? Does it have something? Is it the people? Is it how you were raised in the house? What is it? You're so passionate about Egypt, and I'm amazed and I'm happy that, you still have those feelings to your home country. You used to go back and forth.
After I was born, my father at the time was doing his FRCS. He actually sent my mother, and took me, and I was probably a month or two old, and we went and spent 4 or 5 months in Egypt. Of course, I was an infant. I don't have
any memories,
a recollection of this. But really, from a time when I can remember, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, or when do we have our first memories? I have very powerful images of my grandparents' apartment in Mohandesin. It wasn't too far from Zamalek Stadium. Again, we were there for 4 or 5 weeks during that Christmas season, Christmas, New Year's. It was a time that I always looked forward to. I felt, when I sort of became aware of how lucky I was, because really, by the time I was 10 years old, I'd been to Egypt so many times, and we would always stop somewhere in Europe on the way there, on the way back. So, we traveled very heavily, but, my earliest memories of Egypt were really based around a couple of things. Obviously, first of all, the family. Okay, especially when you're a young child, everyone is coming together, your grandparents, your uncles, your cousins, your aunts, everyone in the same place. It gives you a sense of security. Okay, so that was kind of my first impressions when Egypt. It was a secure place. That's where my family was. And I would say similar things about my family in Scotland. But the other things that really captured me right away, and I was aware from a very young age that Egypt was a very different place, were things like, the pyramids, Valley of the Kings, going down the Nile, the food. I mean, I happen to love simple things like fool and ta'amiyya.
We all love ta'amiyya.
And mulukhiyya, which incidentally my grandparents would, bring the seeds out of Egypt and we'd grow it in our backyards in New Jersey.
Okay.
But when I think about Egypt as a young child, family, culture, safety, sense of place, uniqueness. And those things at a young age had such a profound impact on who I would become as an adult. I was a person that I knew where I came from. I was confident where I came from. I knew, the family that I came from. And then as I got older, I started to explore other sides of Egypt, going out in Cairo at night. My cousins and my family were all members of the Heliopolis Club. I used to go there and play tennis and soccer and swim. And, I started to see, that side of life. And people are happy. People are social. People care and appreciate each other at a different level than, other parts of the world.
Yes.
And then I really started to get a true appreciation for the history of Egypt. We are proud in that we are one of the original civilizations. Okay, Europeans, and I say this all the time, in jest that, look, these guys were living in caves where we were building advanced cities. We had the Library of Alexandria. I started to really become aware of these things, and I was very, very proud to say that I was from one of the I was Egyptian. I was from one of the original civilizations of mankind. And then other things like the beauty of our beaches, When I was younger, I was a very avid scuba diver. So I spent a lot of time in Sharm, diving in the Red Sea. And,
oh, that's nice.
I would come over during the summer times and spend a few weeks, diving. I was also very proud of the monastic side, the Coptic side.
Yes.
Something that I'm very close to. But, the whole, I'm proud. I will always proudly say that I have Egyptian origins. And I think you're right. You mentioned, when you talk to other people about their backgrounds, they're sometimes very passive. And, look, I live in the United States. First and foremost, I do consider myself to be, an American.
Yes.
But obviously my roots are from Egypt, and it's something that I'm fiercely proud of. And I think that innovative side, even that warrior side of what the ancient Egyptians used to be. I mean, if you look at history,
just amazing.
Remember when Alexander the Great, who conquered the world, when he came to Egypt, he was warned, don't go in, don't fight with them. And that's why he came in peacefully. And his generals, Ptolemy, they ran Egypt for centuries after that. But even in the ancient world, Egypt was a place of great respect and reverence. So I think that lives within all of us.
I know. It's amazing. Every time I hear you talk about Egypt, I feel this passion. Do you think you can ever go back and help sometimes if you're asked to?
I would do anything unequivocally for Egypt.
That's amazing.
Anything that I can do on any level, I would do it out of pride and desire, a genuine desire to help and do what I can. Not a sense of obligation, just something that I would want to do. Perhaps in this position that I am now, I have spoken a lot about Egypt and my pride of Egypt to the president over the years. And
I was about to ask you about this because he seems to have a little bit of a special place for Egypt in his heart.
Well,
and I wanted to know if your presence next to him for the last 17 years or 13 years has anything to do with it.
I don't want to take that. I can't. I would agree with you that he does have a particular understanding of Egypt's place in the Arab world and in the Middle East. And he has an understanding, as someone who appreciates history, he certainly understands where we all came from. But I mean, yes. I can't take credit for that.
Maybe we'll give you a little credit. We'll give you a little credit for that.
I've spoken to him a lot about Egypt and things that concerned me about Egypt over the years. I know there were others that worked with him that did the same, but I have spoken to him about, what's your view on politically, how's Egypt doing? And he has incredible respect for President el-Sisi. I have heard nothing but praise. And, the two of them, I think, have forged a pretty unique friendship. They are different people from different background, but I think they understand each other and they respect each other. And I think there's a real commitment for the two countries to work with each other. Because let's face it, Michael, what he has accomplished, look at where Egypt was a few years ago, and look at where they are now. So he's done a tremendous job.
And I think also because the goal is clear and the mutual interest is very clear, is peace and prosperity.
Right. That's what we all want.
And unfortunately, stability. And unfortunately, that was not the case in previous administrations from the U.S. side, I'm saying. So
I think from a U.S. perspective, and again, I just want to be clear that I do not speak, I am not with the U.S. government. I do not speak on behalf of the administration.
You're an attorney, so you always have to declare.
I'm just talking about my own views. But, I think the future of Egypt seemed uncertain not too long ago. But I think that we now have a leader that reflects very well on us. When I see how not just the president, but members of his cabinet, we all watched what went on last week with the United Nations.
Yes.
And I saw the televised meeting. I think President al-Sisi and his cabinet, they look good for Egypt. They represent Egypt well. And this is very important, especially when coming to places like the United States where, if we're being honest, the average American doesn't really understand what is Egypt versus Iraq versus, it's kind of all this mess
all the same.
of everything going on in the Middle East. Yeah. But I think when you have distinguished, prestigious leaderships,
yes,
like we have with the current president of Egypt,
yes,
it sets a tone that, look, Egypt is something different.
And the presence of the president. I mean, I say before the President Sisi, Egypt was off the international map for a long time.
Right.
And the fact that he came in and he restructured the image and recreated the real image of Egypt, being present in all events and taking initiatives and discussing important matters like terrorism and other important matters, and
right,
taking it seriously and really fight terrorism on ground, not on Twitter or social media only. He would, I think that added a lot to Egypt in the last 4 or 5 years.
I agree. And I mean, historically, Egypt has had a dominant role. I mean, throughout history, Egypt has always had a leadership role,
yes,
in who we are, as humanity. Okay. A lot of things go back to Egypt. So really, the leadership of Egypt has an obligation to continue this tradition,
yes,
for future generations. And I agree with you. I think that's what he's doing. And, look, on this issue of terrorism, it's a big problem. And I think we all know that this is not Egypt. This is not what the Egyptians are embracing. This is something alien. This is something disgusting.
And this is something has been imported to Egypt.
That's right. And it has to be eradicated.
Yes.
And he's certainly going to great lengths to do that. And that's something that we notice, now putting on my hat as an American, yes, living in the United States. That's something that I notice, because no one wants to do business. No one wants to visit a country where terrorism is out of control. So it's not Egypt. It's something that has to be dealt with firmly.
The government,
from everything
the
that I
President
can
Sisi and the
see, that's what
government
he's
have
doing.
been dealing with this for quite a few years, but we feel that challenges are massive, especially when there are countries in the neighborhood and that actually funding terrorism. And this is something that President Sisi has finally spoken about it, openly at the last
right,
UN speech, because before he talked about it many times, but he was trying to give chances to those, little countries to understand that we know what you're doing and this is not good for humanity. This is not good for the region. This is not good for the stability. And he was trying to bring, get the attention of major countries like the US. But finally, I think he took it to another level on his last speech, and I think he's close to pointing fingers to certain countries that I can talk about, Qatar and Turkey. He did not mention the names, but they have been using terrorism to destabilize the region. And
well, I think Egypt is lucky that they have a leader that is strong enough to say, look, we have the problem, because really that you cannot solve a problem until you acknowledge that the problem exists and you identify it. Then you can come up with
yes,
a plan to eradicate it. So I don't have any doubt that he will deal with this issue firmly, the way he handled Egypt, the way he got Egypt out of the revolution. He seems to be a decisive person that will do what he needs to do. So we should all stand behind him. And I think that's certainly a quality that I think President Trump sees in him.
What do you think Egypt is playing a role now in the region towards the U.S.? How Egypt is beneficial to the U.S. at this time?
I think, Egypt has been, for the most part, I think Egypt has always been an ally of the United States, with the exception of
certain times and
certain years.
Yeah.
And I think that's certainly in the United States' best interest. It's in Egypt's best interest. The Middle East is a vital region to the world, period, for many reasons. So having stable leadership, having a country where power transfers smoothly, these are all essential things that are required. Again, I'm not really, I am not an expert on Middle Eastern politics. I can only comment on, what I see casually in my own life. But I think what I see Egypt really bouncing back.
Yeah. It's noticeable, right?
It is noticeable. And I think, one area I see some really good work being done in tourism. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of good, marketing techniques. I see people getting excited because really, Egypt is a very unique place. I used to tell people it's really one of the greatest, I can spend a few days in a city, Cairo, and then I can have a great time, in a beach. And then I can go see some, antiquities that don't exist anywhere on earth. I mean, there are very few. How many countries? I mean, I can only think of Egypt, maybe Italy and Greece. I mean, it's a very small number of countries that really give you that level.
Funny story. I was in Greece and we had the tour guide taking us around the different temples and Acropolis and other places, and then I got tired at the end of the day. So because I went from one temple to the other, and most of the statues are all broken, and they different from the Egyptian where we see the actual mummies and everything. So the tour guide was like, "Sir, can you come join?" I said, "I'm a little tired, and do you mind if I sit?" He's like, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Egypt." And he goes like, "I'm sorry, sir." He apologized for what, because he knows, he felt like I was bored seeing things that are not even close to what we have in Egypt with the great, statues and pyramids and mummies and all that. So,
and I think it's also, and again, it's a strange story, but I'll tell it anyway. We were once, I was with my father, and we got a flat tire, 6th of October, bridge.
Of course.
What happens? Within 5 minutes, we have 10 people coming to push the car and change the flat. Yeah. That doesn't happen here. I mean, you get a flat tire on the side of 95.
You're stuck there until somebody
comes. You're going to sit there until AAA or the police or something. But
And actually, people are going to be scared of stopping and trying to help you here, because they don't know,
It's a different...
Yeah, it's a different culture.
It's a different mentality. And again, these were things that I saw as a child that were so unique, that made me really develop, a profound, love and respect for the country. So you asked me, yes, I would do anything unequivocally to help Egypt.
We'll leave it on that note. Mr. Sorial, it's been a pleasure having you on my show.
Thank you, Michael. And anytime, I'm happy to come back.
Thank you. And this is great. Again, I'd love for everyone to read his book about President Trump, The Real Deal. And I think hopefully we'll see you in Egypt, in Cairo sometime soon, in the next few weeks.
I hope to be there in the next few months.
And we'll be in touch. And thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure. And we came to the end of the show. I hope you had enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
جوا منك حلم ممكن يبقى مش باين قوي، وانت تايه بين حاجات وعايشها بدماغ فهلاوي، عايش بتلعن في الظروف مع ناس هدفها تكون كده، ناس قصدها تبقى موقفاك مش عايزة تبقى في يوم قوي. شوف واقرا في كتاب التاريخ، عمرك ما كنت في يوم غبي، ده انت اللي علمت البشر. شوف عاش في أرضك كام نبي، في ناس بتكره لو تفكر، نفسهم فكرك يقف. عقدة خواجة بيخلقوها وبيبهروك بالأجنبي. الحكاية مش بلون وشكل وهدوء، الحكاية إنك قوي رغم الهموم. طلع البطل اللي جواك، يلا قوم، انت تقدر تظبط الأحوال بالظبط.
هنشيل بلدنا على كتافنا، مش هنسيبها ومش هنضيعها، ومش هنخلي حد يقدر يضيعها.